You opened your laptop at 7 a.m. The task was clear. The deadline was real. You had everything you needed. It's now 11 p.m. You've checked your phone 61 times. Reorganized your desk. Watched videos you can't even remember. Started the work 3 times without finishing once. And now you're here, watching this video, doing everything except the thing that's eating you alive. I'm not judging you. I'm describing the human condition. But here's what should terrify you. The average person loses 2 hours every single day to procrastination. Not relaxation. Not rest. Pure, unproductive delay. That's 30 full days every year. Over a 40-year career? 3.5 years of your life. Gone. Evaporated into the phrase, "I'll do it later." 3.5 years. You could have built a business. Written 10 books. Mastered 3 languages. Become a completely different person. Instead, those years vanish. And you won't even remember where they went. Just a vague feeling that time passed and nothing changed. This book changed how I understand that feeling. The War Within doesn't offer motivational fluff. It doesn't tell you to wake up earlier or try harder. It exposes the invisible neurological war happening inside your skull right now. A war you've been losing because you didn't even know you were fighting. By the end of this video, you'll understand your enemy better than it understands itself. You'll know why your brain sabotages you, why motivation keeps betraying you, and how to finally take action even when every cell in your body screams to stop. This isn't inspiration. This is a battle plan. Let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah is a young architect. Talented. Graduated top of her program. Everyone says she's brilliant. At 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, Sarah opens her laptop. She has a presentation due in 3 days. She has the skills. She has the time. She has everything. At 11:23 p.m. that same night, she closes her laptop having accomplished almost nothing. What happened in between? 43 Instagram checks. 2 desk reorganizations. 2 hours of YouTube she can't recall. 3 different outlines started, none finished. And a slow, creeping weight of self-hatred settling over her like a familiar blanket. Sarah isn't lazy. Sarah produces brilliant work, always at the last minute. Always accompanied by unnecessary suffering. Always followed by promises to change that dissolve within days. Sarah is you. Sarah is me. Sarah is everyone who has ever stared at an important task and done anything else instead. Sarah is losing a war she doesn't even know she's fighting. So what's actually happening inside our skulls? Here's the first revelation that rewired my understanding of everything. Inside your brain, 2 generals are locked in eternal combat. The first general is ancient. Scientists call it the limbic system. But let's call it what it really is, your survival brain. This general has been commanding human behavior for millions of years. It's fast, emotional, intuitive, always running in the background. When you feel sudden fear, instant attraction, or the urge to check your phone for no reason, that's the survival brain. It has one prime directive: keep you alive right now. Not tomorrow, not next year, right now. To accomplish this mission, it developed 3 core strategies over millions of years of evolution. First, avoid threats. Anything uncertain, difficult, or potentially painful gets flagged as dangerous. Second, seek rewards. Anything pleasurable, easy, or immediately satisfying gets prioritized. Third, conserve energy. Rest whenever possible because food was scarce on the savannah. These strategies kept your ancestors alive. The humans who ignored immediate dangers to work on long-term projects became lunch for predators. The humans who delayed gratification often starved before the reward arrived. The humans who burned energy unnecessarily didn't survive harsh winters. Your survival brain is the product of millions of successful survival decisions. It's incredibly good at its job. The problem? Its job no longer matches your life. That difficult project isn't a predator. That uncomfortable conversation won't kill you. That creative work doesn't threaten your survival. But your survival brain doesn't know that. It's running software designed for a world that disappeared 10,000 years ago. The second general is recent. Scientists call it the prefrontal cortex. Let's call it your strategic brain. This general emerged much later in evolutionary history. It's slow, logical, deliberate. It requires conscious effort to activate. When you plan for the future, resist temptation, solve complex problems, or focus on a difficult task, that's the strategic brain. It has a different directive: make decisions that serve your long-term interests. Now here's the devastating asymmetry that explains everything about procrastination. The survival brain is always on. It never sleeps. It never gets tired. It's monitoring everything, all the time, looking for threats and rewards. The strategic brain requires fuel. Your strategic brain runs on a limited resource that neuroscientists call executive function. Every decision you make depletes it. Every temptation you resist drains it. Every moment of focused attention consumes it. By mid-afternoon, most people are running on empty. By evening, the strategic brain is barely functional. And when the strategic brain goes offline, guess who takes over? The survival brain, which looks at your important project and thinks, this is difficult. Difficult things might be dangerous. Let's do something easy instead. Let's check Instagram. Let's watch a video. Let's do anything except this threatening thing. This is why willpower fails. You're not weak. You're asking an exhausted muscle to fight an opponent that never tires. You're bringing a knife to a gunfight against an enemy that's been training for 1,000,000 years. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. Psychologist Piers Steel analyzed over 800 research studies on procrastination spanning 4 decades. His conclusion will shake you. The smarter you are, the worse you procrastinate. Wait, what? Shouldn't intelligence help you make better decisions? It does. But it also makes you better at something else. Rationalization. Intelligent people don't just procrastinate. They procrastinate with sophisticated justifications that feel completely, undeniably true. I work better under pressure. Research shows you don't. You just work. The quality is actually worse. But the story feels good. I need to do more research first. After a certain point, research is just procrastination wearing a lab coat. You're not preparing. You're hiding. I'm not in the right mood. The right mood is created by action, not by waiting for it. You have the causation backwards. I'll have more time tomorrow. You won't. You'll have the same 24 hours and a fresh batch of excuses. This is the procrastination paradox. Your greatest asset, that powerful, creative, analytical brain, becomes your greatest enemy. Every excuse feels legitimate because your intelligent brain manufactures legitimacy. You're being sabotaged by your own sophistication. And here's the hidden damage nobody talks about. Every act of procrastination sends a message to your brain. I don't follow through. I don't do what I say I'll do. I can't trust myself. Repeat it enough times, this message becomes an identity. You stop being someone who procrastinates. You become a procrastinator. And once that identity takes hold, your behavior molds itself to match. You procrastinate because that's who you are now. The psychological cost isn't just lost time. It's lost self-trust. And self-trust, once broken, is brutally hard to rebuild. Now let's talk about why tomorrow always feels safe. In 1972, psychologist Walter Mischel brought 4-year-olds into a room at Stanford University. He presented them with a simple choice: 1 marshmallow now, or 2 marshmallows if they could wait 15 minutes. You've probably heard of this experiment. It became famous when follow-up studies showed that kids who waited went on to have higher SAT scores, better health outcomes, and greater success decades later. But here's what you probably haven't heard. The kids who caved weren't weak-willed. They weren't fundamentally different. They were focused on the wrong thing. Mischel's team watched hundreds of children through hidden cameras. The kids who couldn't wait stared at the marshmallow, smelled it, touched it. They kept the reward vivid and immediate in their minds until temptation overwhelmed them. The kids who successfully waited did something different. They covered their eyes, turned their chairs around, sang songs to themselves. One girl pretended the marshmallow was a cloud, a puffy white cloud that didn't interest her at all. They didn't have more willpower. They changed how they perceived the situation. This reveals something profound about human psychology. We don't experience time objectively. We experience it through the lens of perception. And our perception is systematically biased in a way that makes procrastination almost inevitable. Your brain has a built-in flaw that economists call hyperbolic discounting. In plain language, your brain treats future rewards and consequences as dramatically less real than present ones. Far less real than any rational calculation would suggest. Here's how irrational this gets. Most people would choose $50 today over $100 in a year. That's an implicit interest rate of 100%. No legitimate investment offers that return. It's completely irrational. But it gets worse. Those same people would choose $100 in 5 years over $50 in 4 years, even though it's the exact same trade-off. Wait 1 year, double your money. The difference? In the first scenario, one option is now. In the second, both options are in the future. Your brain doesn't treat time as a continuous line. It treats now as real and later as a vague abstraction. A dream. A fantasy happening to someone else. And here's the truly disturbing part. Researchers at UCLA scanned people's brains while asking them to think about themselves in the present, themselves in 10 years, and a stranger. The results were startling. When people thought about their future selves, their brain activity patterns looked more like thinking about a stranger than thinking about themselves. Your brain literally treats future you as a different person. This explains everything. When you push a task off until tomorrow, you're not actually deciding to do it tomorrow. You're deciding to make that stranger, future you, deal with it. And why would you sacrifice present you's comfort for a stranger? Of course, when tomorrow arrives, future you becomes present you, stuck with the consequences of yesterday's neglect. But by then, there's a new future you to pass the burden to. The cycle continues forever, unless you break it. The book introduces a technique called time traveling, and it's one of the most powerful weapons I've encountered. Your brain naturally treats the future as unreal. The solution is to make the future real through deliberate, vivid visualization. When you're tempted to procrastinate, close your eyes and transport yourself to the moment of consequence. Not a vague sense of things going badly. A specific, detailed, sensory-rich scene. See yourself at your desk the night before the deadline. Feel the panic rising in your chest. Notice the time on the clock, 2:47 a.m. Your eyes are burning. The coffee stopped working hours ago. Feel the sick heaviness of knowing this isn't your best work. That you've sabotaged yourself again. See the email you'll have to write making excuses. Feel the shame. Don't just think about this. Experience it. Make it visceral. Then visualize the opposite. See yourself completing the task well ahead of deadline. Feel the relief washing through your body. Notice how light you feel without the weight of pending work. See yourself reviewing your work calmly, making improvements because you have time. Feel the pride of knowing you did this right. This technique works because it hijacks your brain's time discounting mechanism. By making future consequences vivid and emotional, you temporarily bridge the gap between present you and future you. The deadline that seemed 3 weeks away suddenly feels immediate because your brain just experienced it. Emotion drives decisions, not logic. So use emotion deliberately. Now here's the biggest lie ever told about productivity. It sounds so reasonable that you've probably never questioned it. You need motivation to take action. This lie has spawned a multi-billion-dollar industry. Motivational speakers fill stadiums. Inspirational quotes flood your social media. Morning routines of billionaires dominate YouTube. The underlying assumption is always the same. Find the right motivation, and action becomes easy. It sounds logical. It feels true. It is completely, catastrophically backward. Decades of psychological research point to an uncomfortable truth. Motivation is not the cause of action. Motivation is the result of action. Read that again. Let it sink in. When you wait to feel motivated before starting, you're waiting for a specific neurochemical state. A cocktail of dopamine, norepinephrine, and other neurotransmitters that creates the sensation of drive and enthusiasm. But here's what the motivation industry doesn't tell you. That neurochemical state is typically triggered by engagement, not by thinking about engagement. This is why the first 5 minutes of any task are always the hardest. You haven't done anything yet, so your brain hasn't released the chemicals that make doing feel good. But push through that initial resistance. Engage with the task for just a few minutes. And something shifts. The motivation you were waiting for appears. But it appears after you started. Not before. In the 1970s, psychiatrist Peter Lewinson was treating patients with severe depression. The conventional wisdom was that depressed people couldn't engage in activities because they had no motivation. Treatment focused on addressing the underlying emotional state first, then hoping activity would follow. Lewinson tried something radical. What if we reversed it? He started prescribing activities first, regardless of how patients felt. Go for a walk even though you feel hopeless. Call a friend even though you have no energy. Do the dishes even though nothing matters. The results were remarkable. Patients who forced themselves to act started feeling better. Not because the activities were magical, but because action triggered the neurochemical changes that had been missing. This became known as behavioral activation. It's now a first-line treatment for depression. The principle extends far beyond clinical settings. Don't wait to feel better to act better. Act better to feel better. Isaac Newton's first law of motion: an object at rest stays at rest. An object in motion stays in motion. Your psychology works the same way. When you're sitting on the couch avoiding work, There's a kind of psychological inertia keeping you there. Getting up feels hard because you're at rest. But once you're moving, once you've started the task, a different inertia takes over. Continuing becomes easier than stopping. This is why the smallest movement matters more than the grandest plan. You don't need to feel like writing an entire chapter. You just need to write one sentence. You don't need to feel like a full workout. You just need to put on your shoes. You don't need to feel like tackling your entire inbox. You just need to open one email. The first action is always hardest because you're fighting inertia. But each subsequent action is easier because momentum is now on your side. In chemistry, every reaction requires a minimum amount of energy to begin, even reactions that ultimately release massive amounts of energy. This is called activation energy. Human behavior follows the same principle. Every task has a psychological activation energy, a barrier you must overcome to begin. Your job isn't to generate more motivation. Your job is to systematically lower that barrier. Remove friction. Every obstacle between you and the task adds to activation energy. If you want to write, have the document already open when you sit down. Clarify the first step. Ambiguity is activation energy's best friend. Work on project, paralyzes. Open document and write first sentence, activates. Shrink the commitment. Work for 4 hours, feels crushing. Work for 5 minutes, feels trivial. Commit only to starting. You can stop after 5 minutes guilt-free. But you probably won't want to. Here's a technique that sounds too simple to work. That's exactly why it does work. When you catch yourself hesitating, that moment before you drift to something else, count down, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. On 1, physically move toward the task. Not think about it. Move. Open the document. Pick up the phone. Stand up. The countdown gives your strategic brain a simple command to focus on, which prevents the survival brain from filling the space with excuses. The survival brain is scanning for complicated threats. A simple countdown followed by immediate movement slips under its radar. Before it can generate objections, you're already in motion. Now here's something most productivity advice completely ignores. Dr. Tim Pitchell has studied procrastination for over 30 years at Carleton University. His research produced a finding that changes everything. Procrastination is not a time management problem. It is an emotion management problem. You don't put off tasks because you're bad at scheduling. You put off tasks because of how those tasks make you feel. Think about it. You procrastinate on filing taxes, tedious, anxiety-inducing. But you don't procrastinate on planning a vacation, exciting, pleasurable. You delay that difficult conversation, awkward, scary. But you don't delay meeting a friend for dinner, connecting, easy. The actual complexity of these activities is often similar. What differs is the emotional charge. Every task you avoid triggers some form of negative emotion: anxiety, boredom, frustration, self-doubt, overwhelm, resentment, fear. Procrastination is your brain's attempt to escape that negative emotion by substituting something that feels better. This is why willpower-based approaches fail. They treat procrastination as a behavioral problem requiring behavioral force. But behavior is downstream from emotion. If you don't address the emotional trigger, you're just building a dam that will eventually burst. When you feel resistance to a task, you might notice a vague sense of not wanting to. But that vagueness is part of the problem. Fear of failure requires a different response than boredom. Overwhelm requires a different response than resentment. You need specificity. Practice emotional labeling. When you notice yourself avoiding something, pause and ask, what exactly am I feeling right now? Research by UCLA psychologist Matthew Huberman found something remarkable. The simple act of putting feelings into words reduces activity in the amygdala, your brain's fear center. When you name an emotion, you create psychological distance from it. Instead of being the emotion, you're observing the emotion. This subtle shift makes the feeling less overwhelming. Try this language. I notice I'm feeling anxious about this presentation. Not, I'm anxious, but, I notice I'm feeling anxious. That extra distance matters. Here's the uncomfortable truth that productive people understand. Productive action almost always involves some discomfort. Starting something new is uncomfortable. Facing uncertainty is uncomfortable. Concentrating when you'd rather relax is uncomfortable. Putting work out into the world to be judged is uncomfortable. The question isn't whether you'll experience discomfort. The question is whether you can tolerate it without running away. Most procrastination is a distress tolerance failure. You feel something uncomfortable, and you can't sit with it, so you flee to something comfortable, social media, snacks, Netflix, anything that provides immediate relief. But here's what fleeing teaches your brain: that the discomfort was intolerable. Each time you escape, you lower your tolerance threshold. The next time, even less discomfort triggers escape. Over time, you become someone who can barely handle any negative emotion without immediate avoidance. The solution isn't to eliminate discomfort. It's to expand your capacity to hold it. The urge to procrastinate is like a wave. It builds. It peaks. It subsides. You don't have to fight the wave or be destroyed by it. You can surf it. Notice the urge arising. Don't judge it. Get curious about the physical sensations. Where do you feel it in your body? Chest? Stomach? Hands? What's the quality? Tight? Buzzing? Hot? Breathe into the sensation. Don't try to make it go away. Just observe. Watch the urge change. It will intensify. It will peak. And then it will begin to fade. Usually within 3 to 10 minutes. This is crucial. Emotions are temporary. They feel permanent and overwhelming in the moment, but they have a natural lifespan. If you can tolerate the discomfort for a few minutes without acting on it, the intensity diminishes on its own. Every time you escape through procrastination, you never learn this. You keep believing the discomfort would be unbearable because you always bail out before discovering it's not. Each time you successfully surf an urge, you build tolerance. What once felt like a tsunami becomes a manageable ripple. And here's a finding that surprises most people: self-criticism makes procrastination worse, not better. It seems logical that beating yourself up for procrastinating would motivate you to change. Instead, research consistently shows the opposite. Self-criticism creates shame. And shame is a negative emotion, exactly the kind of feeling you're trying to escape through procrastination. So self-criticism actually feeds the cycle. I'm such a failure for not working on this. Feels terrible. Seeks comfort. Procrastinates more. I'm even more of a failure now. Feels worse. Continues the cycle. Self-compassion breaks it. The self-compassionate response to catching yourself procrastinating: this is hard, and I'm struggling. That's normal. Everyone struggles. What's one small thing I can do right now to move forward? No denial of the problem. But no pile-on of shame. The focus shifts quickly to present and future rather than wallowing in the past. Studies show that students who practice self-compassion after procrastinating are less likely to procrastinate on the next task. Kindness creates psychological safety that makes approaching difficult tasks less threatening. You don't motivate yourself through punishment. You motivate yourself through making action feel safe enough to attempt. Now let's talk about environment design, one of the highest leverage interventions you can make. Here's a thought experiment. You're trying to eat healthy. Scenario A: your kitchen is stocked with chips, cookies, ice cream, and soda. Every time you get hungry, you see these options first. You rely on willpower to choose the apple hidden in the back of the fridge. Scenario B: your kitchen contains only healthy options. The fruit is on the counter. The vegetables are prepared. The junk food simply isn't there. The healthy choice is the only choice. Obviously, scenario B gives you a better chance. Yet when it comes to productivity, most people live in scenario A. They sit down to work surrounded by distractions. Phone within arm's reach. Social media one click away. Notifications pinging constantly. Comfortable couch beckoning for a quick break. Then they wonder why they can't focus. Your environment isn't neutral. Your environment is a choice architecture that's constantly nudging you towards certain behaviors. Every object in your workspace is a cue. Every option available is a temptation or an invitation. Every friction point between you and productive action is an opportunity for procrastination. The survival brain follows the path of least resistance. Always. If checking Instagram is easier than starting your project, Instagram wins. You don't decide this consciously. Your brain makes it automatically, below your awareness. Design your environment so that the path of least resistance leads where you want to go. Your phone is a weapon of mass distraction engineered by some of the smartest people in the world to capture and hold your attention. Social media companies employ behavioral psychologists specifically to make their products more addictive. You're not fighting fair. You're bringing a knife to a gunfight. Stop bringing the knife. Change the battlefield. Remove your phone from your visual field while working. Not face down on the desk. That doesn't work. A study by the University of Texas found that even having your phone visible, even turned off and face down, reduced cognitive capacity by a measurable amount. Your brain is partially tracking the phone even when you're not using it. Put it in another room. Delete social media apps from your phone entirely. Use website blockers with teeth, ones you can't easily disable. Create a dedicated workspace used only for focused work. When you sit there, your brain knows what's expected. The location itself becomes a cue for concentration. Every night, spend 5 minutes preparing your environment for the next day's success. Clear your desk. Set up what you'll need. Close browser tabs. Write down the one thing you'll work on when you sit down. This transforms your morning. Instead of arriving at chaos and spending 30 minutes figuring out where to start, you arrive at a launch pad ready for action. Your past self has set up present self for success. Present self will do the same for future self. This chain of environmental gifts is how consistent productivity actually happens. In 2001, researchers conducted a study that quietly revolutionized behavioral psychology. They took women who wanted to perform monthly breast self-examinations, a simple health behavior that most intended to do but few actually did consistently. Both groups received educational materials about why self-exams were important. Both groups committed to doing them, but the experimental group added one extra step. They completed this sentence: I will perform my self-examination at specific time, in specific place. The results were astonishing. Control group, 53% followed through. Experimental group, 100% followed through. Not a modest improvement, a complete elimination of the intention-action gap. This technique is called implementation intentions. Hundreds of studies across different domains have found the same pattern. Simply specifying when and where you will do something dramatically increases the likelihood that you'll actually do it. Why does specificity work? Vague intentions live in the strategic brain. I should exercise more. I need to work on that project. These are conscious, deliberate thoughts. But the strategic brain is slow and easily overridden. Implementation intentions transfer control to the survival brain. When you specify, I will run at 6:30 a.m. on Monday from my front door wearing my blue shoes, you're programming the survival brain to recognize a specific situation and automatically initiate a response. The decision has already been made. When 6:30 Monday arrives, you don't have to decide whether to run. You execute the pre-programmed behavior. No deliberation. No negotiation. No opportunity for the survival brain to generate excuses. The more specific, the more powerful. Weak. I will work on my book. Strong. I will write for 30 minutes at 6 a.m. in my home office, at my desk, with the door closed, before checking any digital communication. Make your intentions embarrassingly specific. Your brain responds to specificity like a computer responds to code. But here's what separates temporary improvement from permanent transformation. Everything we've discussed so far, understanding the enemy, managing emotions, designing environments, programming behaviors, these are all powerful techniques. But they're missing something. They're focused on what you do. They haven't addressed who you are. And here's the truth that changes everything. Behavior change that conflicts with identity won't last. Behavior change that expresses identity becomes automatic. If you see yourself as a procrastinator, you might temporarily override that identity through techniques and willpower. But you're swimming against the current. Every time your guard drops, you'll drift back to behaviors that match who you believe you are. But if you see yourself as an action taker, as someone who does the work, who follows through, who executes without waiting for permission from their feelings, then productive behavior isn't a battle. It's an expression of who you are. The ultimate anti-procrastination strategy isn't a technique. It's an identity shift. Your identity isn't fixed at birth. It's built, slowly, incrementally, through the accumulated evidence of your actions. Every time you do something, you cast a vote for the type of person you are. Complete a task despite not feeling like it? That's a vote for, I'm someone who follows through. Skip a workout because you're tired? That's a vote for, I'm someone who prioritizes comfort over commitment. Check social media when you should be working? That's a vote for, I'm someone who gets distracted easily. No single vote determines your identity. But as the votes accumulate, patterns emerge. Your brain observes your behavior, draws conclusions, and feeds those conclusions back as beliefs about who you are. This is why small actions matter far more than most people realize. Each small action is a vote. And votes compound. Here's a practical rule that protects everything. Never miss twice. Miss a day of your new habit? That's one vote against your desired identity. It happens. You're human. But miss 2 days in a row? You're not just casting 2 votes against. You're starting a pattern. You're providing evidence that the new identity was a temporary anomaly and the old identity is still in charge. One miss is a stumble. 2 misses is a story. The rule is simple. Miss once? Get back on track immediately. The very next opportunity, you follow through. You don't wait for motivation. You don't beat yourself up. You just act, because that's who you are now. You're going to have bad days. Days when the techniques don't work. Days when willpower is depleted before lunch. Days when you fall back into every pattern you thought you'd overcome. This is inevitable. The question isn't whether setbacks will happen. The question is how you respond when they do. The productivity industry often sells a fantasy that with the right system, you'll become consistently productive every day, making smooth linear progress toward your goals. This is a lie. Real progress looks like chaos. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. A great week followed by a terrible week. Breakthroughs interrupted by setbacks. Momentum built and lost and rebuilt again. If you expect linear progress, every setback feels like evidence that you're failing, that the system doesn't work, that you're fundamentally broken. You interpret normal fluctuations as catastrophic failure. Accepting that progress is nonlinear is itself a form of resilience. Bad days don't mean the approach isn't working. They mean you're human. When you experience a setback, use this protocol. First, pause before judging. Your immediate reaction is emotional: frustration, shame, despair. These aren't reliable guides to action. Let the spikes subside before deciding anything. Second, assess honestly without catastrophizing. What actually happened? Not what you fear happened. Not the worst interpretation. One day of procrastination is one day of procrastination. It's not proof you're incapable. It's one data point in a long journey. Third, extract the lesson. What triggered the setback? Was it environmental, emotional, circumstantial? Understanding what happened helps you prevent recurrence. Fourth, recommit without punishment. Self-punishment doesn't improve future behavior. It just adds negative emotion. Simply recommit. That happened. Tomorrow, I'm back on track. No drama, no extended guilt. Just a clean restart. Fifth, take one action immediately. The best antidote to a setback is movement. Identify the smallest possible action you can take toward your goal and do it. This creates a micro-win to offset the setback feeling and provides evidence that you're still someone who takes action despite difficulties. Finally, and this might be the most important insight of all, Viktor Frankl survived the Nazi concentration camps. In Man's Search for Meaning, he wrote about what separated those who survived from those who didn't. Those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how. The same principle applies to procrastination. When you're connected to a meaningful why, the discomfort of difficult work fades. The impulse to escape weakens when you have something worth staying for. When work feels meaningless, when you've lost connection to why you're doing it, even small obstacles trigger avoidance. What's the point of pushing through discomfort for something that doesn't matter? Procrastination sometimes isn't laziness or poor technique. Sometimes it's a signal that you've lost connection to why you're doing what you're doing. Before starting your most important work each day, take 30 seconds to reconnect to why it matters. Why am I doing this? Who benefits? What happens if I succeed? How does this connect to what I value? Don't skip this as too simple. 30 seconds of reconnection can provide hours of sustained motivation. The survival brain doesn't resist as hard when the strategic brain has a compelling answer to why bother. Now here's my personal take on everything this book teaches. Where I think this book is absolutely right, procrastination isn't a character flaw. It's a mismatch between ancient brain circuitry and modern demands. Understanding this removes the shame that makes procrastination worse. That insight alone is worth the price of admission. The techniques are powerful. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 countdown genuinely works. I've used it hundreds of times. Environment design is incredibly high leverage. The identity shift, seeing yourself as someone who acts, changes everything over time. But here's what I think is missing. And it's crucial. This book treats procrastination as something to defeat. An enemy to destroy. A war to win. But sometimes, procrastination is data. Sometimes you procrastinate because the task genuinely shouldn't be done. It's not important. It's not aligned with your values. Someone else should be doing it. Your resistance is wisdom, not weakness. Sometimes you procrastinate because you're burned out and need rest, not more techniques. Pushing through in that state isn't discipline, it's self-destruction. Sometimes you procrastinate because you're in the wrong career, working towards someone else's goals, building a life you don't actually want. Your avoidance is your intuition screaming that something's fundamentally wrong with the direction, not just the execution. Before deploying all these weapons, ask yourself, is this a procrastination problem, or is this a misalignment problem? If you consistently procrastinate on the same category of tasks, despite trying every technique, that might be important information. Not about your discipline, but about your direction. The biggest breakthrough for me came when I stopped trying to force myself to do things I didn't actually believe in, and started building a life where the work I do is the work I want to do. The techniques in this book are powerful, but they're most powerful when applied to meaningful work. Not as a way to beat yourself into doing things you secretly hate. Win the war, but make sure you're fighting the right one. So here's your action plan. 3 things you can start today. 1. Tonight, prepare your environment for tomorrow's success. 5 minutes. Clear your desk. Set up what you need. Remove your phone from the workspace. Write down your one most important task. When tomorrow arrives, you'll face a launchpad instead of chaos. 2. Tomorrow morning, use the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique on your first difficult task. Don't think. Count down and move. Experience what momentum feels like when you don't give your brain time to object. 3. Start tracking your identity votes. At the end of each day, note which actions voted for the person you want to become and which voted against. You're not trying to be perfect. You're trying to end each week with more votes for than against. Over time, those votes compound into a new identity. That's it. 3 things. Simple but not easy. The gap between who you are and who you could become isn't closed by hoping. It's closed by doing. Not through dramatic transformation. Not through perfect consistency. Through the accumulation of small actions that compound over time into an unrecognizable new reality. Every action is a vote. Keep voting for who you want to become, and eventually, that's who you'll be. Now I want to hear from you. What's the one task you've been procrastinating on most? Not the surface excuse, the real emotional reason you're avoiding it. And when you imagine yourself at the moment of completing it, how does that feel? Drop it in the comments. Sometimes just writing it down creates the momentum to actually do it. If this video helped you understand your own brain a little better, subscribe. I break down books like this every week, the psychology of why we do what we do, and how to actually change it. The war within is real. But now you know the enemy. Now you have the weapons. Go take one action, right now, not tomorrow. The clock is ticking. Your life is happening now, whether you're participating or watching,